The text arrived between helping a bride-to-be choose her mother of the bride dress and restocking the display of hand-stitched Italian leather gloves. My phone, face up on the polished oak counter, lit up with a preview of the message. It was from Julian. I'm done playing house. I'm leaving you and moving to Bali with Sasha. She actually gets my passion for life. Don't bother looking for the money in our joint account. I've taken what's mine. Time you learn to stand on your own 2 feet. A cold, sharp clarity settled over me, a sensation so distinct it was almost physical. The ambient jazz music in my boutique, Elysian, seemed to fade into a distant hum. My hands, resting on a bolt of cashmere fabric, did not tremble. My voice did not waver as I turned back to Mrs. Delaney, offering a serene smile. The champagne satin would be exquisite with your complexion, I said, my tone even and warm. It photographs beautifully. The only sign that my husband of 15 years had just detonated our marriage via text message was a slight, almost imperceptible tightening at the corners of my eyes. I waited until Mrs. Delaney, her purchase, wrapped in our signature ivory paper and tied with a black silk ribbon, swept out of the store with a happy wave. Then, and only then, did I pick up my phone. My fingers were steady as I typed my response. My name is Eleanor Vance, and at 42, I had just received the most cowardly and callous goodbye in modern history. But while Julian was probably preening over his dramatic exit, picturing me sobbing onto the glass countertop of my little hobby, I was calmly locking the boutique's French doors for the evening, flipping the open sign to closed with a quiet click. The signs had been there for a year, subtle at first, then blaring like a faulty car alarm. The late nights at the architecture firm that never correlated with a bonus or a particularly demanding project. The sudden, fierce protectiveness of his phone, which now required a fingerprint and a new passcode I didn't recognize. The midlife crisis purchase of a motorcycle he was too afraid to ride fast, the new wardrobe of tight-fitting shirts that highlighted a softening middle he'd started obsessively training at the gym. 6 months ago, I'd found a receipt for a couple's massage at a luxury spa dated on an evening he'd claimed to be working on a deadline. That same night, while he snored, blissfully unaware of his own carelessness, I'd quietly opened a separate, private bank account at a different institution. A month later, when he'd suggested, with a patronizing smile, that we simplify our lives by combining all of our assets into one joint pot, I'd agreed with a cheerful nod. That very afternoon, I'd begun the meticulous process of transferring the bulk of my personal savings and the boutique's profits to my new, secure account. The joint account he'd just so triumphantly emptied contained precisely enough to keep him from growing suspicious, roughly 2 months of our regular, shared living expenses. The rest, a not insignificant sum built from a decade and a half of shrewd business and careful saving, was safely tucked away. Alongside it sat a meticulously organized digital folder, screenshots of suspicious credit card statements, copies of receipts, notes on his unexplained absences. I had been building my case in silence, a fortress of evidence against the day I knew was coming. My phone buzzed again, another missile from his newfound freedom. Don't waste your breath begging. It's over. Sasha and I fly out tomorrow. I'll have a mover get my stuff. Later. Sasha, the new, painfully young intern at his firm. I'd met her at the annual summer gala. I'd watched her hang on his every word, her laughter too shrill, her hand resting on his arm for a beat too long. She was 22, all dewy skin and manufactured worldliness, naive enough to believe a married man leaving his wife for her was a grand romantic gesture, not a cliché. I didn't respond. Instead, I scrolled through my contacts and called my lawyer, Meredith Thorne, the fierce, brilliant woman I'd retained 3 months earlier when I discovered the recurring charges for a boutique hotel in the wine country on our shared American Express. It's time, I said, my voice cool and composed. He just made his move. The papers are ready to file, Meredith replied without hesitation. Her voice was like polished steel. I'll initiate proceedings first thing tomorrow morning. Would you like me to have him served in Bali? No rush, I said, a small, cold smile touching my lips. Let him think he's won this round. Let him get comfortable. Another text from Julian lit up the screen. I know this is probably a blow to your ego. Let's be honest, Elle, you're not the woman I married. At least you have your little project to keep you occupied. My little project? Elysian, the luxury boutique I had built from a dusty, vacant storefront into one of the city's most successful retail destinations. The business that for the last 5 years had out-earned his comfortable but stagnant senior architect salary. The business whose finances I had kept scrupulously, obsessively separate, despite his occasional jabs about my lack of transparency. I smiled, thinking of the certified letters that would soon be cutting through the tropical air to greet him. Let him have his moment of deluded triumph. I spent that evening in our beautiful, airy home. My home. I had inherited it from my Aunt Clara, and had, despite Julian's persistent, wheedling suggestions to make it truly ours by adding his name to the deed, kept it solely in my name. Another one of those seemingly paranoid instincts that now felt like divine providence. As I gathered the paperwork Meredith would need, I found our wedding album buried on a high shelf. Julian looked like a different person, softer, his smile genuine, his arm around me without calculation. That was before the discontent had set in, before he'd started gazing longingly at other men's sports cars and other men's younger wives. My phone continued to buzz, a persistent insect on the marble kitchen island. Each text was more condescending than the last. I've been unhappy for years. Sasha brings me joy. You'll be fine. You were always more independent than me anyway. Already spoke to my parents. They understand. We just grew apart. No one's to blame, really. I took a screenshot of each message, methodically adding them to the evidence folder on my cloud drive. Let him talk. Let him dig his hole deeper with his own unthinking words. Meredith would particularly enjoy his casual admission of premeditation. The final text of the evening was the most foolish. By the way, use the joint Amex to book our business class seats and a villa. Consider it a severance package, LOL. Perfect. I immediately called the credit card company. Yes, this is Eleanor Vance. I need to report fraudulent charges and cancel a card immediately. Of course, Mrs. Vance. Can you identify the charges in question? The representative asked politely. 2 business class tickets to Denpasar, Bali, booked today, and villa rental charges at the Uma Sermalung estate. I also need to remove my husband, Julian Vance, as an authorized user immediately. Do you have any documentation of this fraud? She inquired. I have text messages from my husband admitting he used our joint card to book travel with his girlfriend after emptying our joint bank account, I said smoothly. I would be happy to forward them to your fraud department. The representative's professionally neutral tone couldn't quite mask her grim satisfaction. That won't be necessary at this time, Mrs. Vance. I've canceled the card and flagged the charges as fraudulent. They will be reversed. Is there anything else I can help you with? No, that will be all. Thank you. I ended the call. Julian and Sasha would arrive at the airport tomorrow to find their tickets void and their luxurious villa reservation canceled. The fantasy was already beginning to crack. Another buzz. Don't worry about the house. I'm not heartless. You can stay there until you find something more suitable for a single woman. I actually laughed out loud. Did he truly believe, after all this time, that he had any claim to the house my aunt left me? Had his ego inflated so dramatically that he'd forgotten the very foundation of our living situation? Another message followed. I know the storm means a lot to you. We can work out a fair valuation for my half of the business. His half? Of my business? The one I conceived of, funded with my own inheritance, and built with my own hands, while he complained about the long hours and called it my creative outlet. The business he had never so much as balanced a ledger for. I poured a glass of an exquisite burgundy I had been saving for a special occasion. This qualified. Tomorrow, Julian would learn some harsh truths about separate versus marital assets, about financial misconduct, and about the ironclad protection of a sole proprietorship. But for tonight, I would enjoy the quiet of my home and plan the first pages of my next chapter. The morning brought a flurry of increasingly frantic texts from Julian, each one a satisfying testament to his crumbling plans. What the hell did you do, Eleanor? The airline says our tickets are invalid. The villa management company won't return my calls. Answer me. This is childish. I'm trying to start a new life here. Don't be so bitter. Sasha is upset. This is so embarrassing. Call me. I silenced my phone, placed it in my desk drawer, and got ready for the day. Friday was our busiest day at Elysian, and a new shipment of exclusive French lingerie and Swiss skincare was due to arrive. Life, with all its mundane and magnificent details, went on, even when your husband of 15 years attempts to run off with an intern young enough to be his daughter. Around noon, my personal cell phone rang. It was Julian's mother, Beatrice. I took a steadying breath and answered, putting her on speakerphone as I meticulously tagged new inventory. "Eleanor, dear," she began, her tone laced with a forced sympathy that set my teeth on edge. "Julian told us everything, about how distant you've been, how you've neglected the marriage. He says you're being vindictive now, causing problems with his travel plans." I didn't pause my work. "Did he mention that he emptied our joint bank account and charged thousands of dollars worth of tickets and a luxury villa for himself and his 22-year-old girlfriend on our shared credit card, Beatrice?"
The silence on the other end was profound. Then a hesitant, "Well, he said you left him no choice, that the marriage had been over for a long time." "Beatrice," I said, my voice calm but firm, "I have his text messages. Would you like me to read you the one where he bragged about taking what was his? Or perhaps the one where he mocked me for my age and suggested my business was just a little project?" Another long pause. I could almost hear her recalibrating her perception of her golden boy. He did seem, rather unkind in his texts. I told him that was no way to speak to anyone, let alone his wife. "I appreciate you saying that," I replied, though I felt no warmth. "But I think it's best if we end this conversation here. My lawyer has advised minimal contact with Julian's family during the proceedings." "Proceedings?" she gasped. "Already? Oh, Eleanor." "Goodbye, Beatrice." I ended the call. By late afternoon, the gossip mill, fueled by Julian's younger sister, Chloe, was in full swing. Messages from mutual friends trickled in with updates. Apparently, Julian and Sasha were stuck at a generic airport hotel, their Balinese dreams indefinitely postponed. He'd tried to use his personal credit cards, but they were all maxed out. Another red flag I'd noted and documented months ago. Meredith Thorne called with an update. The emergency hearing is scheduled for Monday. Given his documented admission of draining the joint account and the credit card fraud, we are in an exceptionally strong position to freeze all remaining marital assets and request immediate restitution. Has he been served yet? Not yet, but the process server has his location at the airport hotel. He'll be served today. Speaking of which, she added, a note of amusement in her voice, the girlfriend's social media is providing us with a treasure trove of evidence. She's been live posting their adventure, including some rather unflattering comments about you and your age. I smiled, thinking of my own carefully curated treasure trove, a year's worth of financial statements, hotel receipts, and text messages that painted a clear picture of premeditation. Julian had been so focused on his grand, romantic escape that he never once considered I might be 2 steps ahead, watching, waiting, and preparing for his moment of ultimate stupidity. My phone buzzed with another text from Julian, a direct response to being served. "You think you're so clever? I made copies of all the store financial records. I built that place with you. Half of it is mine." I forwarded the text directly to Meredith, adding it to the growing file of his self-incriminating mistakes. Let him learn the hard way about the legal definitions of separate property and business ownership. Sometimes the best revenge is not a dramatic confrontation, but simply being impeccably and unassailably prepared. The emergency hearing on Monday was a masterclass in quiet, methodical victory.
Julian showed up looking like a party of a younger man. Designer jeans that were too tight, a blazer that was too trendy, and a deep tan that spoke of a recent spray session rather than a tropical getaway. Sasha waited outside the courtroom, her youth painfully obvious under the harsh fluorescent lights of the courthouse hallway, clutching her phone like a security blanket. My lawyer, Meredith, presented our evidence with the precision of a surgeon. Each piece, Julian's gloating text about the emptied account, the fraudulent credit card charges, the documented history of hidden expenses and hotel stays, was laid out for the judge. I had compiled it all over months of quiet, unemotional observation. "Your Honor," Julian's hastily hired lawyer sputtered, "my client admits to some impulsive decisions made during a highly emotional time. But Mrs. Vance's actions have been calculated and vindictive, designed solely to inflict maximum hardship." "Calculating?" Meredith countered, her voice dripping with icy contempt. "You mean prudent. My client protected her separate assets after uncovering evidence of her husband's infidelity and financial deception. She maintained detailed records of his suspicious behavior. That's not vindictive, counsel. That's intelligent business practice." The judge, a stern woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, reviewed my documentation. The property deed in my name only, the Elysian business licenses and incorporation papers listing me as the sole owner, the bank statements showing a clear and consistent separation of business and personal finances. "Your husband, Mr. Vance, you admitted via text message to deliberately emptying a joint marital account and using a shared credit card to fund international travel with your companion. Do you deny this?" Julian shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I was trying to make a clean break. It was our money." "By committing what appears to be financial fraud," the judge stated flatly. "And now you are claiming rights to a business that, according to this documentation, was established before your marriage and maintained as a separate entity throughout?" "The business grew during our marriage," Julian's lawyer jumped in. "My client is entitled to a portion of that growth. He provided moral and emotional support." Meredith didn't even let him finish. "Moral support, like these text messages, Your Honor, where he refers to Mrs. Vance's thriving business as a little project or a hobby, or these social media posts where he belittles her work. That's not support, that's derision." I watched the reality dawn on Julian's face. He had thought this would be simple. Empty the account, run off to paradise, and then in the divorce, claim half of everything. My home, my business. He had never bothered to understand the legal distinctions he always mocked me for caring about. He called my meticulous bookkeeping obsessive. Now it was the wall that would protect everything I had built. "The court finds sufficient evidence of financial misconduct," the judge announced, her voice echoing in the quiet room. "All remaining shared assets are to be frozen pending final dissolution. Mr. Vance is ordered to return the funds removed from the joint accounts within 48 hours. "But that money's gone," Mr. Vance protested, a note of panic creeping into his voice. "We had to use it for." "Then I suggest you find a way to replace it," the judge cut him off, her gaze icy. "And, Mr. Vance, this court takes a very dim view of using marital assets to fund extramarital excursions." Outside the courthouse, I heard Sasha's voice, high and whining. "What does this mean, Jules? What about Bali?" His response was lost in the satisfying click of my heels on the marble floor as I walked away, back to the business he had never understood or respected. The weeks that followed were a study in Julian's escalating desperation. He tried to claim that Elysian had been his brainchild, that he'd invested sweat equity in its early days. He even produced a handful of old emails where he'd given me casual, unsolicited advice about store layout, presenting them as proof of a business partnership. My meticulous records, every invoice, every bank transfer from my personal account, and every hour of my labor quickly rendered his claims laughable. "He's getting desperate," Meredith observed during one of our calls. According to the investigator, they're staying in Sasha's studio apartment. Living on an intern's salary isn't quite the glamorous escape he'd sold her. Julian's family began to reach out again. Their tone markedly changed from their initial defensive stance. Chloe, his sister, called me, her voice thick with shame. "Elle, we had no idea," she confessed. "He told us,